Good morning, Patrick. How are you?
Good morning, Stoyan. I'm great. Really a great day for me. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I've been on the road for 10 days, more or less. So I just came home yesterday, did a workshop for 15 scale ups from Finland, Estonia, and Sweden. Received great feedback. Still
Cool.
recovering when it comes to, my physical energy, but it's always exciting to meet you, Patrick, and it's been such a great opportunity to actually meet you in person for the first time a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Credit to the organizers of TEDx AUBG, for having me as a speaker last year and then having you as a speaker this year. So we got the chance to actually spend some time together in person after knowing each other, being LinkedIn and Zoom buddies for a couple of years. So
Yeah.
yeah, really good to meet you, man. Finally.
But we managed to really establish a relationship, get connected via LinkedIn, and did not go silent, but really established a relationship which is so fruitful. It's just amazing. That's the power of LinkedIn if used correctly, right?
So everybody who's listening right now, LinkedIn actually works. But just to give you a bit of a context, so those of you who haven't seen Patrick before, actually Patrick is coming back to the podcast. The first time he came, we talked about his first book called Fast Scaling. Patrick is having quite a diverse background, I would say, having done stuff in legal, having done stuff in the VC world, being an investor, understanding really well how to fast scale a company. And of course, he's an expert in leadership. And his new book, The Leadership House, is coming out just today, ladies and gentlemen. The book is called The Leadership House. It's published by Wiley. I'm still waiting for my copy. And this is not on Patrick. Actually, it's on me. I've been traveling, so I couldn't receive my copy. But the book is called The Leadership House. You can find it already online. Make sure to go check it out. We'll talk about the book. We'll talk about how Patrick actually wrote the second book, the process, the behind the scenes, and of course, we'll cover what does it really take to be an effective leader. But maybe let's start from there, Patrick. Why writing a second book? I remember the first time you were working on the book, it was like, oh man, that's I don't know, I'm ever gonna do that. And then we had another conversation, like, yeah, I'm working on the second one. The third one is like, what's going on, Patrick?
Yeah, I think meanwhile, I enjoy writing books and sharing knowledge via this medium. Um, Indeed, after the first book, I actually thought and promised to my wife I would never ever write another book. Totally underestimated what it means to write a book. I think I started out writing the first book when the pandemic hit, and I thought, I don't have to commute anymore, so I have enough time to write a book. So, as I said, pretty naive. Yeah, so I ended up working, getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and work long hours because especially if you're a venture capital investor, you cannot put a book out there which is like just mediocre. It needs to be high quality. And the first draft, that's probably what every writer says, is just crap. My first draft was full of repetitions, and I didn't like it. But the good part was, there was a book in my hands, and then refining it, improving it, was a lot of fun. And the feedback I received from across the globe was just amazing and so rewarding that at one point in time, when I realized that you know many founders, many management teams, leadership teams I work with struggle when it comes to even defining what is leadership, not not knowing how to actually become more effective. And when I worked with them, I gave them advice or worked as a coach, but it was like we were working on specific topics. Yeah, how to create trust, why is trust important, or accountability. But the feedback I received was always, or sometimes, Patrick, this is great advice. It's really helpful, but it would be so helpful if I had a framework I could follow systematically to become a better leader, that I can use day in, day out. And then I've done some research on it, and indeed, leadership lacks this kind of system, a framework that people can follow. So I decided to look into this topic and thought about all the topics I discussed with the leadership teams I worked with, and I wondered, is there actually a framework? Is there, are there elements, that I can create and align so it becomes a framework? And yeah, and then after I wrote down all the elements that are important, I came up with this leadership house picture, and then I decided, yeah, I will do it again. I will do it again. I will write again. Yeah, and
And
here we are now.
you
Yeah,
really hitting a nail here, right? As you said, there are so many books about leadership,
yeah,
but what people need these days is simplification. Step by
yeah,
step, some sort of a structure they can follow. And before you lead me through the framework, which I was happy enough to see a couple of weeks ago at during your TEDx talk. But before you lead me through that, I want to hear first. Who do you hope will read this book? Who would be the ideal? Who do you want to impact with this book?
yeah. So I mean, it is written as a tale, and the tale plays in the startup ecosystem.
Mhm.
So there's a CEO, a founder of a startup who's who's struggling, and he thinks he's a strong leader. It's not about leadership, but over time he realized everything is about it's all about leadership, and why he struggles has to do with leadership. So certainly the first idea is that I've been writing this book for startup founders,
Mm.
but the framework is not for startup founders only. I also worked in a publicly traded company. I worked in a law firm. You said, I've got a kind of diverse background. Um, it's for everyone in leadership positions, who has the feeling that I had when I first was in a leadership position, that, I had kind of self-doubts. I didn't know what to do. It's for everyone in a leadership position. It's for managers who are functional experts, and due to their functional expertise are suddenly put into a leadership position and don't know what that means, actually now being in charge of people and not in charge of product, etc. So it's for everyone who has to lead people, who's in charge of people.
I love it, and I would like to invite you to very briefly share what are the elements of the leadership house, just so we can see the whole picture, and
Yeah,
then later in the conversation we can go and deep dive into each of them. So, what are the elements of the leadership house?
yeah. So there are actually three main parts. The first part is about building a strong team. The second part is about setting up this strong team for success. And the third part is about ensuring that the teams execute the plans that you have in terms of turning purpose and vision into reality. And there are 8 elements. So building a strong team has to do with trust, which is the basis, the foundation of the leadership house. And then the first two pillars are actually a strong team. So how do I build a strong team? And the second pillar is shared values, because I think that it's really important that team members share the same values, because sharing the same values will create a strong team culture, and this team culture is of utmost importance for success. If you have established the team, it's about setting up it for success, and there are two elements that I think are important. The first are shared goals, and the second is joint plans, because certainly purpose and vision are important, but they are rather intangible. You cannot just tell your people, here's our purpose, here's our vision, let's go and get there. Yeah? So in my experience working with teams, it's also about defining the what. What do we need to do to turn vision into reality? And these are the goals. So more tangible. Yeah, what are the goals ahead? And from my TEDx talk, for me, it's not about a leader having to tell people what to do, about imposing goals on the team, but involving the strong team that we have created in the goal setting process, and asking the team what do we actually have to do. This is why I call it shared goals. And joint plans is more granular. It tells what each team member, team leader needs to do, and this is really important, and deliver in terms of results, so we achieve our goals. And then finally, execution It's about holding people accountable. And that's a tough topic because many leaders shy away from holding people accountable. They have to lead crucial conversations. But if you build trust in your teams, if you have a strong team, real relationships, you can hold people accountable. And you can hold people accountable for both the tasks and, this again important, the results they achieve. Because if you work with results, people do not tell you, well, it's not my fault, I'm not responsible. They all know it's about the results they need to achieve. They reach out for help. So holding accountable is possible if you follow the framework. And then it's about empowering your team members. A lot of buzzwords, right? Also that's a topic of feedback I receive. A lot of buzzwords. What is accountability? What is empowerment? I describe it in this book, but empowerment for me is, not only giving the team members the tools and resources they need, but empowering to make important decisions. Because if you have created a strong team, if you have set it up for success, why would you now want to approve everything? You become a bottleneck. So it's really about allowing them to make important decisions, which frees up your time to really focus on what your job is. Your job is to lead, to be in charge of people, and then the roof of the leadership house, you're in charge of making sure that you execute your plans. Because leadership is about results, not about tasks. And execution, there I talk about mainly about all the leadership challenges out there and how leaders can overcome them. And certainly the leadership house framework has actually, for every major leadership challenge, an answer, a solution. So that's the framework, 8 elements.
Thanks, Patrick, for giving us an overview. And I would imagine one of the challenges for a framework like this, or the book that we wrote with Cristobal, Perform, is many of the topics that you cover are so important, yet they sound like common sense, right? Like, oh, these are topics that everybody knows. But the thing is, and you've been working a lot with startups as an investor, evaluating teams, helping them to grow, to set up systems and so on. And you know that very few actually consistently apply those kind of things. Some of them don't know them, because maybe they come from a tech background, or so they don't have the softer human skills so well developed. But many of them actually, they've heard about these things, but it's one thing to know, it's another thing to apply it consistently in a super dynamic life of either as a startupper or ambitious corporate team, you name it, right? So I really want us, if we can do that in the next 45 minutes, to go down in the trenches and try to provide as much practical ideas and tools and strategies that our audience can maybe pick from. But since you chose trust to be the fundamental, the base for the whole leadership house, and I completely agree. What is trust for you? And if you have witnessed teams that have this one really in a good place, what did they do right in order to build strong trust in the team?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's 2 questions actually. One is what, and the other question is, how do you build trust? I mean, I would bet that you have worked in environments full of mistrust, Stoyan. At least I've done. Yeah. So you start watching your back. You're hiding maybe some mistakes you've made. You do not feel comfortable challenging your team members or challenging your leader, because if you do not trust that leader, you might be fired, you might lose some kind of bonus. So wherever there is mistrust, people do not focus on what is important for the team success. It's more about avoiding making mistakes, and watching our backs. And in contrast, if you work in trusting environments, and since a few years I always focus on creating trust in my teams, it's just wonderful that you have open discussions, that you can challenge one another, that people in my team who made a mistake approached me and told me, Patrick, oh, something really bad happened, I made this mistake, said, I could, embrace that person, yeah, kiss that person, because it's just great that they speak up and say, I've made a mistake. I should, I celebrate these team members, because that shows there's trust in the team. And then if they disclose these topics early on, we can as a team solve them, and then team success is again the goal. And as a board member, I've worked with a team, and especially a CEO that I did not trust, and also in the board, the shareholders representing the investors. I'm not sure that everybody trusted each other, and I have the feeling, although we sold that company for quite a good amount, I think this company could have gone way farther if with trust in the team between founders and board. Yeah, and they fell short of their potential, I think.
I would love to include here another framework which was shared to me on the podcast first, and then I dig deeper into it. I don't know if you've previously seen this framework. So there was a guest on a podcast called Misho Stefanov. Misho, if you're listening, you know, hope you're having a great day. Thanks for sharing this with us. But there's this framework. I think it's coming from academics. What are the four elements or components of trust when it comes to work environment? And I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on that. But the first one is the honesty piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do I trust that this person is going to tell me the truth if I ask them, and they'll be, they will not lie, they will not hide things. Like, that's the honesty. So
Yeah.
if you don't have it, you don't trust the person. The second one is competence. Patrick,
Yeah.
you can be super honest, right? But can I trust that you have the competence, the skill set to deliver whatever your task is, right? And this one can be learned. You can get an intern, they don't have the competence yet, so you need to, manage them a little more, give them more feedback. But at the moment, maybe you don't trust them that much because they don't have the capability. That's the second one. The third one is they might be honest, they might be competent, but do I trust that they will keep their word, deliver by deadline? Take ownership pretty much. Or if they don't deliver, they'll make sure that they communicate to the right person. And look, sometimes people are honest, people are competent, and they're not really good in following through and actually delivering. So you don't trust these people. The fourth element, and actually I had a person that had these three previously in my team. She was
Yeah.
amazing. She was honest. She was very capable. She would deliver all the time. But the fourth element is, do I trust that they care?
Mm-hmm.
Are they passionate about it? Are they motivated to actually be part of this thing? Right?
Yeah.
You've probably seen people like that, right? Having the first three, but they do the job and leave, right? It's like, I don't really trust that they're into it, right? So these are the four components, and I really love this framework because it makes you think, why is it that I don't trust this specific person? Right? In the case that you said, the CEO or whatever, I didn't really trust him. Like, in which of those components maybe you didn't trust him?
So let me approach this from the leadership perspective. So maybe how can a leader create trust? And maybe what you say about, does that person really care? That's a topic I recently wrote an article for the Inc. magazine about. It's called Truth in Leadership. For me, it's, truth in leadership is something like company culture, but from a leader perspective. Strong company culture is when you have a great purpose, an inspiring vision. Yeah, you work on strong values, then you will see the behavior that you want to see. But it won't lead to the desired outcome if the leader is in a position. The purpose of being a leader is not because he wants to be there, but he's there because of he wants to receive the salary, he wants to receive recognition. Yeah, the why am I here? Why am I in the leadership position? If this is not aligned with the goal of the company, of the team, then there is no truth in leadership. So the purpose is important for the company, but it's also important for us as leaders. Why do we do the things we do? And that is important for a leader, but I think if there's one advice I give my children is, you need to find something that you love. If you find something you really want to do, you will be good at it, yeah, and you will enjoy doing it. Yeah, just don't do anything just for the money or for the sake of getting recognition. That's not rewarding. So that's about the why. Now, the framework that you've shared, I think I agree. I use a different framework. It's called the respect framework. Respect framework for building trust. It certainly has more elements, but the ones that you've mentioned are also included there. So the R in respect stands for relationship, because I believe we can only build trust and become a trustworthy person if we build real relationships with the people. Otherwise, if we don't have real relationships, it's more like trust because we want to trust, but we cannot even know, can this person be trusted? It's about building relationships, and
I want you
this
to
is
stay a little bit on that one. I want you to
yeah,
stay a little bit on that one, and we'll cover the rest of the respect. But this is a very kind of a topic that you have the one corner of people, one camp that's saying, "Hey, we're a professional team. We don't want to be so close. Do the job. We winning." And then the other camp is like, "I want to get to know my people. I want us to be friends. I want us to trust each other. I want us to do things together. To people to like
yeah,
each other." So can you maybe talk a little bit about that, because I
sure,
feel it's very important.
absolutely. One of the major leadership challenges I see is that leaders want to make friends with their team members. It's not about making friends. Being a leader is not about making friends. If you end up having a friend in your team, that's great, but that's not the goal. And building relationships is not about making friends. I mean, in private life, maybe that is, but in business, in teams, it's about getting to know the other persons. What drives them? What intrinsically motivates them? Yeah, because you want to understand what they contribute, how they think about topics, and you need to be emotionally intelligent in order to grasp this, right? Put your ego aside, focus on the other person, ask open questions, try to understand them, and then work on this understanding of the other person. That's the two elements for me of emotional intelligence, and E is actually the E in respect. So, long story short, it's not about making friends, and building relationships is not about friendship. It's about relationships, about understanding each other. And that's for me something. If there's a leader who says, I don't care, we are professionals, everybody has to do what he or she has to do, that leader will fall short of its potential, and the team will fall short of its potential. I'm convinced. So it's for me not the leadership style that I would ever use.
That's a very, very good point. I'm happy that I asked you this question so we can go a little bit deeper on that, right? Like, I do believe it's not just it's gonna fall short. I feel like people in 2023 will choose companies that care about them, leaders that care. And being caring doesn't mean you should be friends, right? As
Yeah,
you said, if it naturally happens, fine. But the main goal is not that. The main goal is the person appreciating me, caring about me, understanding my personal motivation, and trying to align them with my role and the things that I do. If the person, there's many ways to do that, right? But that's a very, very important one. Okay, so relationship is the first one in respect. What are the other ones?
yeah. The E, the second one is emotional intelligence. Intelligence, because we need to be emotionally intelligent to build these kind of relationships. Then the S, you've mentioned that as well. It's skills. Skills are important. Just because you're a skilled person doesn't mean that you are a leader. But if you're not skilled, if you're not able to ask the right questions, it's tough for your team members to trust your judgments. So I think that's also why I'm convinced that everybody should work on his or her leadership skills constantly. And this is also one reason why I wrote this book, The Leadership House, so people can develop the leadership skills. It's about, sometimes it's also about, functional expertise, but I'm more from looking at this from the leadership skills. And respect, we also touched on the P, professional behavior. If you can choose between what is right and wrong, choose what is right. If you just choose wrong just once and people notice, there is no trust anymore. People will ask themselves, what is that person doing when we are not around? How often is he choosing wrong? It destroys trust. So being professional is really important. The second E is about empowerment, because if you empower people to make important decisions, if you give them the tools and resources, it actually reinforces your trust in their capabilities. So, empowerment reinforces trust. Respect, the C, you also mentioned it, consistency, walking the talk. If you tell someone, you will help him or her, let her or him attend a leadership course, you should do so. Yeah, you should, and if you cannot do it for whatever reason, yeah, you need to communicate. You talk to that person, I will walk the talk, but just at this point in time, it's difficult, but you will get your course as soon as I can. This is kind of a leadership behavior which is consistent. And T is also what you said, I think you mentioned honesty. For me, it's more transparency. I think honesty is more for me a result of trust, and transparency is more a tool that we use to create trust. Because if we are transparent, or the other way around, I've worked in an environment where I like the people, I like the team, but the leader was not transparent about a specific topic. And I always wondered, what's there? What is there? Why is he not transparent about this topic? There was, it was not 100% trust. I trusted that person, but there was always something, why? Yeah. So being transparent, shows that, you can trust that person. And if there is something that you cannot share for legal reasons, for whatever reason, it's easy to explain why. And if that is compelling, what you explain, you understand, okay, that person wants to be transparent, but he or she cannot. Creates trust. And this is like the respect framework is something, I use when I work with leadership teams, when I see that trust is an issue, and it helps.
So you can see the whole picture and you can evaluate if there's any gaps with the leader at this very moment. Is that what you mean?
In terms of transparency, or
in terms of like you work with the leaders using the framework respect, meaning you identify with them whether there are some specific gaps the leaders are having,
yeah,
in each of these, and what could be done so they can become a more effective leader.
Yeah, I mean, you start discussing, talking with leadership teams about their problems, right? And there are so many reasons why teams can struggle, but one reason can be that there's a lack of trust in the team. And if I realize this, certainly it's about working on the solution, and the respect framework can help, because if you go through the letters and discuss them with the leader, you will know or notice what the problem actually is. Is it not being transparent? Is it not? Often it's someone who's not building real relationships, to be honest. It's like, really being genuinely interested in the team members. That's in my experience often the problem, that either they don't want to, they don't know how to go about building real relationships with team members. And as you said, some don't want to, and then we need to discuss why it's important to do it anyway.
It's very interesting what you're sharing, and I will refer to what you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation. I was once invited to do I think it was 2-3 day team offsite in Manchester in the UK for a company there, and they had a really inspiring new CEO that was really, a great leader, I would say, from my observation working with her. So she was brought on board in a company that maybe more than 10 years company, not super old, but a company that already got to a cycle of everything is structured and things. So the culture before she got on board was, you are not allowed to share. If you innovate too much and you fail, you'll be, the bosses will say, hey, what are you doing, right? So you got to
Yeah.
follow the rules, you got to do the things. And we had to work with the executives, and she wanted to show them, hey guys, I want you to innovate, I want you to experiment, I want you to have a certain percentage
Yeah.
of your decisions to be wrong. But it took us a while to really identify that and to have these conversations. And I would imagine that's a huge challenge for many teams. I mean, Patrick, you've been working with hundreds and hundreds of startups, scale ups. And I want, if you can, on top of this as a challenge, maybe identify what do you think founders, leaders are struggling with when it comes to being an effective leader? Like, what are some of the things that maybe they're not paying enough attention on and they should shed more light on?
Yeah. So, good question. I think, what do they struggle with? What prevents them from becoming a leader, an effective leader? I think it refers to what we've discussed at the very beginning. Nobody tells them what it actually means to be effective, and then they participate, in a team offsite and learn something about, let's say, you need to be humble, you need to be strong at the same time, do not micromanage, but delegate and empower your people. And maybe they learn something, but in my experience, as soon as they are back in the trenches, they do what they've always been doing. They lead following their gut feeling. So I think that's the main problem that I have identified, and this is why I shared the framework. But certainly there are other typical leadership challenges. Yeah, I mean, leadership self-doubts has to do with you not knowing what it actually means to become an effective leader. But then others have a hard time delegating topics. They want to be on top of everything. They do not know how to delegate effectively. And it is important to delegate effectively, because as a leader, you're not in charge of product, sales, marketing, you're in charge of people. And then you can only be in charge of people if you delegate tasks that you do not have to do on your own as a leader. Communication is a huge problem. How do I communicate effectively? So I've already said, when I ever write a second edition of this book, I probably will add one pillar, and this is communication. I touch upon communication when I talk about all the pillars, but actually it should be a separate pillar, because communication is so important.
It probably should be a separate book, to be honest. We also have
Yeah,
it in the Perform framework. The second R stands for robust communication, but
yeah,
but it's like, which angle should I take it? It's such a huge topic, and it's such a something that will distinguish whether a leader is an effective leader or not. Communication is so huge to be a masterful communicator.
yeah. And if you just think about the word effective leader, effective actually means you solve topics, you solve problems, you achieve results, right? It's at the end it's all about results, and how do I get to the results I want to get to. Again, the framework, that's why the framework is set up as it is, so that we end up with results, with achieving our goals and turning vision and purpose into reality. And so there are probably 20, 30 typical leadership challenges out there, crucial conversations, but it has also to do with communication.
So let's go really on the how to, right? Because there might be some people listening. There's usually many startup founders listening,
Yeah,
entrepreneurs, also business managers, and not everybody is naturally focused on people. Like, there's product people, there's tech people, who are much better in the so-called hard skills, right?
yeah,
So what would be some kind of how-tos, right? Imagine a startup founder never really paid attention so much on the software topics, on the human side of the things, but now they're open, they want to learn. What would be some practical ideas of where could they start? Should they start setting up more feedback meetings with the team if they haven't? Like, could you give us some practical
yeah,
ideas, something that you've seen that works in companies?
yeah. So I mean, you started talking about product and people with hard skills. And I think a typical situation is someone is really good in tech or product. Everybody admires that person. And suddenly someone says, now you're going to lead the team, right? But that person is a functional expert. Yeah. He or she might not be an expert in terms of how to lead people. And what a typical reaction that I see is that these people try to do what they've always been doing. You know, if they know something, they start digging deep into the actual work. But that's not their job anymore. They are not there because of their functional expertise. And maybe they are there for the wrong reasons, but now they are in charge of leading people. Yeah. And they don't know how. Right. So that's a typical situation. Um, and what was the second question was
And
about?
actually, it's about this situation. I will get
Yeah,
back to the question, but about this situation, you know, what would be an effective way to handle this situation, both from a perspective of, maybe the executives that
yeah,
promoted this person, but also from perspective of this person that just got promoted and now he needs to be
great
a
question.
leader.
So from the executive perspective, if you have followed the leadership house framework, hopefully you have built real relationships with the people. You understand what motivates them. Maybe that person you want to promote in the leadership position doesn't want to be a leader. You know, maybe he or she is just a functional expert and wants to remain a functional expert. Not everybody wants to be a leader, right? But if you know that person, you can assess whether that is true or not. And if you communicate, surprise, surprise, that person might tell you, actually, I don't want to be in that leadership position. So as an executive, before you put someone into a leadership position, I would always ask myself, is that person capable of becoming leader? Can I help that person become an effective leader? So assist in making the transition. Yeah. But most importantly, the why. Is that person actually willing to become a leader? And that also answers your second question from the functional expert. It's again about the why, it's about the purpose. Why am I here? Yeah.
Is
Am
it
I
because
in
is it because this position will allow me to get better salary, and the only way
yeah,
to get better salary is if I get promoted as a manager? I don't really
yeah.
want to, but it's the natural step, right?
Absolutely. And then suddenly you realize, in 2 years' time, you earn a little bit more money, but you are absolutely desperate and dissatisfied with your job because, sorry, you're absolutely dissatisfied with where you are, your position, and it's just, you realize it was the wrong direction that you've chosen. And I think the point, about feedback that you've mentioned,
Mm.
I think a practical advice for leaders, how do I build trust, how do I build real relationships, is not about, instead of having once a year a feedback session, now have it every quarter. No, it's about doing this every day, about saying good morning to your people, saying goodbye to your people, asking how you're doing. Is there anything I can do for you? Do you have everything? Yeah, that's, it's, as a leader, that's your job. That's a daily job. And feedback you give directly. You do not wait 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. If in trusting relationships, you give direct feedback. And
Mm.
usually people appreciate that you give that feedback. And the other way around, if you don't give that feedback and then 4 weeks later you say, do you remember, this Tuesday afternoon,
Mm.
you screwed it up there? And then you say, why didn't you tell me? Yeah. So that person was 4 weeks working and thought, everything was just fine. Just to realize that the leader, thought for 4 weeks that it was not all good, and that he was doing it in the wrong way. It's about real relationships and daily relationships.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because it's the word leader is like you're leading, right? It comes with the benefits and it comes with the disadvantages. It's not always fun to be a leader, right? You're the one that's responsible. You got to lead people through difficult times as well. I remember a conversation I had with, forgot his surname, so we can maybe mention it, but he was a former executive in Apple. His name is Max. Um, and we had a conversation, and he's like, people are not working for me. I'm working for my people.
Exactly.
People need to understand I'm working for my people. And every leader needs to understand this, right? You're there to make sure everybody has whatever they need to succeed. And that means, and I love what you mentioned, it's like every day a little bit of something, right? It's not like every quarter, let's make a team offsite, and then the other 3 months you're like doing nothing, right? It's like,
Yeah,
if that's a commitment, if I want to be a effective leader, if I want to be a purpose, people-centered leader, I need to maybe sit every week and say, what can I do this week to be there for my people? How many conversations will I have with the people that I lead and manage? So to ask them how they're feeling, what do they need, where do they want to grow in 6 months, in 12 months. Like there's so many tools, strategies, practices you can do, but it's about deciding this is going to be a priority, meaning I need to spend the time, I need to spend the
yeah,
resources. And it's sometimes hard because we want to hit goals and targets, but it's a necessity.
absolutely. And we both know Howard Behar, the former president of Starbucks International. We've been on a mastermind call with him, and
Mm.
luckily he ended up writing praise for the Leadership House book. I'm still
Congratulations, man.
amazed.
That's
Yeah, yeah, but Howard stands for this servant leadership, and I think this is exactly what we are talking about now. It's like, being there for the team. The team is not there for us, but we are there for the team. And this is just, in general, I think in life a good mindset to have. It's like this give first attitude.
Mm.
So also as an investor and a board member, for me, it's not about the founders working for me or being in charge of delivering. It's about me asking the founder, what can I do for you to make you better, to help the company achieve the goals. It's always about give first. And if you give first, you usually get back. That's not always the case. Um, and also in my experience, also interactions also on LinkedIn, is I sometimes sense that people believe that if I reach out, it's about me asking for something, and 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 I think the magic happens if you meet someone, um, for example, Enrique Acosta Gonzalez, also a leadership expert from the US. I
Mm.
reached out to him. He was open, and we ended up, about what can we do for each other. It's about giving, and we ended up writing a joint article in the Inc. magazine. This about trust and leadership. Um, and it's just amazing if you give first and focus on helping the others, how rewarding this is, and how much you actually end up getting back, um, instead of only focusing on ourselves and our egos.
Let's talk about leadership and vulnerability, Patrick.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you find that to be a struggle? I'm coming from the Balkans, and I gotta
Yeah.
say, because of the whole historical and cultural thing, many founders I happen to work with, they're still struggling a lot with the vulnerability, or like admitting their mistakes. Like in their mind, it's like, I need to be my best, I need to show that I'm perfect, because if I'm not, then I'm weak, and my team
Yeah.
will not respect me. That's the belief. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So vulnerability. So again, a leadership buzzword. No, I bet I asked 100 people, 99 do not have an answer what that actually means. Yeah. So some might say it's about being weak. Vulnerability doesn't mean that we need to be weak. And vulnerability is also not that we can be incompetent. Yeah? It's about showing that we are not perfect either. it's about, being transparent that we also make mistakes. And again, if you are transparent about your, let's say, not blind spots, but weaker skills, yeah, you know, that's totally fine, because we cannot be experts in everything. This is why we need a team. This is why we need a strong team. Only as a team we can achieve our goals. And no, it's actually not possible that that we have a leader who knows everything. So that's for me vulnerability. It's good, but it's
It-
not being incompetent.
and it's really connecting to what you said at the beginning of the conversation as well, that when you are showing up as being imperfect and vulnerable, it's one prerequisite for your team to be able to be more open and say, hey, I made a mistake today, and not being afraid that they'll be judged or something will happen. And it's actually a really difficult one. I keep on having these conversations with when there's a new person joining the team, and even with people from my team, that there's not a new person, but just reminding him, hey guys, I really need you to tell me when I'm not doing something well. Because like you get this kind of you're the manager, you're the leader, you're the boss, right? So people don't, hey, he's very busy, I don't want to tell him that he was really bad presenting in front of this client, for example, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, it was good enough. He's like, no, I don't want good enough. I want to know when I'm not doing well. Like, I want to know that when I'm hosting the podcast, I'm maybe asking too many questions about this or whatever. Like, I want them to be free and safe to say, hey, Stoyan, you really sucked yesterday. Here's what you can do better. And it's a very hard to build a culture where people are having the trust to show up. But when you do it, man, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's not easy to embrace this negative feedback, to be open to this. Yeah, it's it's I think it's just natural. I rather hear, you've done a terrific job, Patrick. Yeah. So, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. And then I agree. I want to hear what I can do better. And I was I'm keynoting several events, and also currently talking about the leadership house. And my first my first keynote I gave, one of my friends was in the audience, and he said later on, there were amazing examples that you've been giving, about the Metallica frontman James Hetfield, when it comes to how to build a team, how important is culture. And he just gave me the feedback that, he longed for more of these examples, this, tangible examples of people in these kind of difficult situations and how they solve it. It makes it more tangible. It's like, storytelling, which is also
Yeah.
why I wrote this book as a story. Yeah. So, but at first I thought, he wrote me this email that, I hope you liked the keynote. And said, yeah, I liked it. Feedback later. I said, well, feedback later. Well,
Ooh,
what's wrong with
something is coming.
my keynote? But he was honest and he was transparent and he was helpful. He helped me improve. Great. Yeah.
Yeah, man, feedback is so freaking important. When I started doing workshops initially, and you know me, I have a lot of energy, so I'll structure all this content and join a team and give them the tools and give them the best material that I have. And then, fortunately, I have some of these friends that are really, you know, constructive. They'll like give me the positive stuff, but then one of the guys was like, Stoyan, great content, but why don't you engage people a little more? Like, it was mainly you talking, right? Like, people want to be engaged, people want to work in groups, people want to, I mean, give you an example. Like, I come back from this training that I did with these 15 teams in Estonia, right? And and I know it now because it's been several years I'm in the industry now. I just knew the final session that I do during such a boot camp is a mastermind session,
Yeah.
right? Like, so yes, I'm the international speaker who shares all these tools and stuff. Great, they like that, but what they like most is interacting with each other, right?
Yeah.
So when I set the frame and moderate meaningful discussions to happen, this is
Yeah.
the one that usually gets the best grades and the highest rating.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't know if I wasn't given feedback, if I wasn't having the right people to come and say,
Yeah.
it's Doyan, you gotta step up, man.
And we both know. I know one person that we don't want to work with, but it's that you immediately sense if people are self-focused, if they try to get every second for themselves to share what they think, and the conversation is about dialogue and about back and forth, and getting from A to Z via conversation where we share both knowledge, experience, and hopefully this is also how we now create value for your audience, not by one of us just telling, but by interacting and figuring out, asking you questions. And as you said before we started, let's see where we get. There was no clear plan, and I think that's great. If you talk about leadership, there are hundreds of places where we can end up, and the conversation will tell us where we are heading. And
There's no clear
that's also the
plan.
fun part.
There's no clear plan, that's sure, but there is a clear intention, right? I only like to invite on the podcast people who are, on top of being exceptional in what they do, they're kind and caring leaders. And this podcast, it needs to be a win-win-win, right? It needs to be, of course, I want to give back and I want people to get inspired, but of course I want this podcast to help us and my team as well in some ways to be more out there, right? So there's this thing. How do we give the most to the audience from this conversation? And at the same time, as a host, it's like, how do I feature you, Patrick? Because I know you can help a lot of people. So how can we feature you in your, so I'm always thinking about that, and you're always thinking about that. That's why we're here. And I think that's a very interesting thing that leaders should always navigate, right? On the one side, it's like focus on making sure your people have the best, they have the best experience at the workplace. They're given the task they want to be given. They're growing. And at the same time, as a leader, you need to have an eyes on the prize, right? Like, you have results. Being an effective leader is like, how do I impact people so they enjoy the journey? But then again, we need to reach some results. So it's this balance that's super, super interesting. And Patrick, I want to read a comment by Navid, former guest of the podcast, an exceptional leader, great connector. You can see he wrote a big comment, and maybe we can comment on that. So Navid, first, he mentioned previously in the conversation that he really loved how you dissected friendship and relationship, this aspect. But then he wrote, leadership qualities are traits that every great leader shares, regardless of their job title, including honesty, integrity, confidence, empathy, humility, resilience, vision, influence, positivity, and gratitude. Leadership is about inspiring people to do things they never thought they could, not just persuading them to do things they do not want to do. What are your thoughts on that, Patrick?
I think nicely summarized, right? And I think if you look at this list of leadership traits, I think it scares a lot of people to become leaders, right? I think honesty, integrity, confidence, empathy, resilience, vision, influence, positivity. It's great, and it's all true, and that makes maybe also leadership so difficult. It's not easy to be an effective leader, but it's also, I think, absolutely rewarding. Yeah, but yeah, leadership qualities and traits. Agreed. Yeah.
And I think the last kind of thing I want to cover as a topic with you, Patrick, is we talk about leadership, and it in many ways sounds sexy, right? Like, I want to be a leader. Everybody wants to be a leader, or majority of ambitious people want to be leaders. But talking about the other side of things, the weight, the difficulties that comes with being a leader.
Yeah.
Like, because being a leader also means sometimes making choices, choosing the least worst scenario, right? Like, you don't have a good scenario, but you got to make a choice. You got to make a call. You got to do a decision. Like, we're writing now a book about, it's called Perform in Times of Crisis. It's about crisis leadership. And
yeah.
we are gonna feature this story. Probably seen or heard about it. Winston Churchill. I think it was 1941 or 40. I'm guessing up right now, but this is the story around the Dunkirk evacuation. And if anybody have watched, there's a movie they featured that story, The Darkest Hour. So basically, what happens is, in order for all these 350,000 people who are at the coast in France, they want to evacuate them into England. The Nazis are coming. They have a lot of machinery, a lot of guns. That, you know, so what Winston Churchill does is he's using all these civilian ships, and they make the biggest evacuation, right? However, there's these bunkers. So basically, they make a plan in a way that they leave 4,000 people to die. Mm-hmm. Like there's no way. It's like the plan is as such. That's the highest probability we save the biggest majority of people. But these 4,000 people, nobody's going for them, right? And you know, there's this story where he's like getting all this heat from everybody. It's like, hey, how can you leave people to death, man? Like, how can you sentence people to death? And so it's like, it's a tough call, right? But then at the end, they actually ended up saving a lot of people. But these 4,000 people, you know, so it's like, that's the hardship of being a leader, that, you know, sometimes you got to choose between doing the nice thing, you know, the easy thing, and doing the right thing. And doing the right thing means you're taking the ownership. It's on you. You made the call, right? So,
I mean, in companies, let's get away from death. Yeah, but in companies, sometimes on teams,
for sure.
it's also about, you know, firing or laying off people. And sometimes you need to do this. You know, it's a tough topic because I mean, currently there are many people out there who are being laid off, and one could argue, is this really necessary? But I think there are situations where you need to do so in order to make the whole system work, and then that's a tough decision to make as a leader, because also you know what that means, what that entails for the people you're saying goodbye to, for their families. So that's not an easy one. Yeah. So indeed, leading is not only it's not only nice. It comes with a lot of challenges, and also, you know, being a leader means everybody's watching you 24/7. Like, you know, you need to be a role model every day, every minute. It's also not easy, and that's also why, you know, you need to be sure whether you want to be a leader or not. And I don't know whether you agree, but I see a tendency also towards people trying to become solopreneurs and having a business where they are on their own, but a decent business. They don't have to lead people. They can just do what they are good at. And that can be quite fulfilling and rewarding. So we don't have to be leaders. Yeah? It's really, again, maybe closes the circle. What's the purpose? What's our purpose?
Yeah. And looking back at your leadership house, one of the columns is shared values. And I think that is making things a little easier, right? When you have very clear understanding what are the values that we all buy into, right? Like, what are the things that we believe in? How do we prioritize them? Because you can make decisions easier when you are all clear what the values are. Hey, this is a very lucrative, financially great project, but these people that we have to work with, they don't share our values. So even though it's going to be hard because we need the finance, we'll say no to this project, for example, right? Tough decision.
Yeah, and I think in my last talk that I gave, I talked in connection with shared values. I dived deeper into Metallica, because if you know the Metallica, the heavy metal band story, there was a band member at the very beginning, a founding member, Dave, who I think became the head of another heavy metal band. I don't know the name now. He was an awesome guitar player, probably one of the best, if not the best. But and there was certainly how Metallica describes this is they had a lot of fun, a lot of alcohol. They call themselves alcoholics, yeah. But there was one difference. While Three had a lot of fun and did stupid things, he became like angry and mean.
Mm.
And before the first album came out, the frontman James Hetfield said to that guitar player, "You're out." Yeah, and it was certainly it's a great story about leadership. It's certainly hard for him, if you know where Metallica is today, and that he could have been part of that journey. But James Hetfield decided, no, for me, it's about not being a cultural fit, and culture is so important. You're out, right?
Even if he's a
And
great performer, right? Even if he's
exactly,
good at what he does.
exactly. So,
Mm.
when I talk about building a strong team, I talk about that usually the answer is when I ask what is a strong team, people tell me it's the right people in the right roles. Yeah, but I think that's not the whole story. Think about soccer. How many soccer teams have we seen? Having the Messi, like Paris, PSG. They don't win anything. The Champions League. They have the best players in the right positions, but they will lose anyway. So for me, it's about in addition, it's about teamwork, and teamwork is just one value and kind of part of the team culture. So for me, having the right people has two dimensions, and the first is functional fit, and the second is cultural fit. Do the people embrace the same values in terms of how we want to get from A to Z? And that's I think where the magic happens.
That is where the magic happens. And if you want to know more where the magic happens, you should definitely go and get a copy of Patrick's book that's coming out today. Today is
Yeah,
27th of April. If you're listening to the podcast later, The Leadership House by Wiley. Let me see if I have somewhere here the picture for the people who are watching the video. The Leadership House. And Patrick, maybe just finally to kind of wrap up this episode, where could people find the book? And maybe once again, can you summarize what will people get out of reading the book, and who is this book for, really?
yeah. So it's still unbelievable for me, but it's supposed to be in bookstores around the globe. So Wiley is pretty bullish on this book that it can really help people. So let's see. You can certainly also buy it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and other online retailers. Yeah, it's an amazing day. I think I don't know. You never know when you start writing a book. I guess it has been now 2 years that I've been working on this project, and it's an amazing day. What people can get out of this is they will get a system, a framework they can follow systematically. Yeah, so I think they will understand what all the buzzwords mean, and it's all wrapped hopefully into an exciting, surprising story that is fun to read and ends up, if you close the book, and some have already read it and said, it's easy digestible, it's a wonderful story, and they like the system. So hopefully this book helps many leaders out there. Yeah? And maybe I've just noticed, maybe one word, Stoyan, we named this "How to Become an Effective Leader and Impact Humankind." I just realized, I think I think not everybody needs to be a leader, but the biggest problems that we are facing, like climate change, etc. Yeah, we won't solve them on our own. We need strong teams to solve them, and for strong teams, we need strong leaders. And that's also why I believe this little book, yeah, can not only help people become better leader, maybe it has a little tiny impact on our life, on humankind, by maybe helping some founders become effective leaders and solving great problems that we have and that we must solve.
There you go. Now we covered that, so we can keep the title as it is. Thank you so much, Patrick. and
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to receiving my. I'm actually super proud to have been the first person who pre-ordered the book, and I can't
Yeah.
wait to receive my signed copy by Patrick. Now that I will not be traveling in the next like 10 days, so Patrick, after the call, I'll make sure to send you my address, and look forward to read the book. And everybody listening who is interested into building companies, who is a manager, who is maybe being promoting as a manager and now needs to take a leadership role, make sure to check out the Leadership House. It's already out. So do yourself a favor and read that book. Let us know what you think. And of course, thank you so much for listening to the Productivity Mastery Podcast, 147 episodes already. If you haven't yet, do subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Share this episode with a friend if you find that it could be useful, and keep providing us with feedback, and we'll keep bringing you people like Patrick sharing practical tools how to be a better leader and a better entrepreneur. So thank you so much, and see you next time, the next episode of Productivity Mastery.